Good morning, everybody. Welcome to Living Astrology with Janet. It's time to grab your cup of coffee or tea, sit back and relax while we chat about what is shaking up our planet for the week ahead. It's kind of been a crazy weekend, hasn't it? Astrologically, I titled this morning's show the Mindshake Week, as Mercury is highly activated for the week. And so is Neptune, as he is about to shift directions from retrograde into the direct motion or forward motion. And when planets change direction, it is often a process. It doesn't happen like overnight. It is a process of the planet slowing down and stationing direct, or retrograde means that there's this moment of stillness, and then it proceeds to appear like it is moving in the opposite direction. So it's never a one and done day. Like, it's not just Thursday or Wednesday that Neptune will turn direct, but it is already activating, as you can tell by the number of earthquakes, the solar storms that are going on, the rainstorms that are going on. And I just find it interesting how all of these things pile up together. Now, if you remember on Friday, we talked about what was happening today astrologically, which is Mars in a square to Saturn. Now, you could really say Saturn is the form and the structure, what's beneath our feet. And as we, went through the weekend, we had big solar flares, and solar flares coming from giant sunspots that were just crackling with the potential for huge impacts for us, or CMEs. And indeed, a couple of them did create coronal mass ejections, and we end up with Earth getting in the way of those particular waves of energy. And they're big waves of energy. They can knock out satellites and knock out all of the communications that we have, interrupting our internet, interrupting our phone services. And it's kind of crazy that something so far away, 93 million miles away, could do something like that to our little planet. But it is what happens frequently. So, something else that caught my attention this weekend was this giant earthquake that was in Alaska. And so the solar explosions followed just a couple minutes later by the earthquake in Alaska, thanks to J-Lo for noting the times for me, so I could see very plainly how they were correlated together. And then, the 7.6 earthquake this morning off the coast of Japan, shades of the tsunami, Fukushima major earthquake that happened when Neptune first moved into Pisces way back in 2011. So there's significant events that are kind of handshaking here. And it's hard if you were a pure scientist. A scientist would just say there's no correlation, right? That's just what a scientist would say, because they don't see the spiritual side of things and how those things could be working out to create something here on our planet. But I'm not saying that the astrology creates the earthquake, but we can absolutely see patterns between intense planetary configurations like Mars square Saturn, that's activating today, exact today, but activating ever since Friday when we started talking about it. Solar storms, earth shifts or earthquakes, all of these things, when the tension mounts in the cosmos, then tension builds up in the Earth's crust. Tension builds up within each one of us, right? We are all in this together, so to speak. And when the tension releases in one field or the other, it often releases in the other one as well. So if the tension of the sun is releasing through sunspot activity, then it can also cause the release of tension built up in the Earth's crust. And that can be through volcanic action, that can be through earthquakes. But then also our weather on this planet is impacted by the solar activity and also by the activity of the planets. they're correlations, right? They're not causations. Causations would say Neptune causes earthquakes. Well, in astrology, we say Neptune rules earthquakes, right? As the ruler of the potential for earthquakes, flooding, the oceans, so forth. That's what Neptune's territory is. So when there are big earthquakes or big floods or big flooding potentials, as there is for us here in the Pacific Northwest where I live, then we look to Neptune, right? What is Neptune doing? Well, Neptune is under pressure, right? And Neptune is under pressure. The sun is blowing off CMEs. The earth is shaking in response. The weather on the earth is in response to all of this as well. So again, not causation, but correlation, right? And something exquisite happened this morning too in relationship to this that I'll be sharing, because this week is a week where today we start with Mars squaring Saturn, which we'll just touch on a bit, but because we talked about it on Friday. But the whole week is one long mind shaking, Mercury quaking series of transits. And Mercury, last week, I think it was, or the week before last, it was all Venus, right? It seemed like every day there was a Venus transit going on. Well, this week it's all Mercury transits that are going on. So we're going to break those down and look at them, because Mercury is about to change signs, moving out of Scorpio, a water sign, where he is trining Neptune and Saturn in Pisces, a sign ruled by Neptune, water, earthquakes, floods. Okay. Like, I'm not making this up, right? These are things that are happening in our world on Earth. At the same time, the astrology, as above, so below, right? Astrology showing us those same things. So I love it when we can see how these things correlate. And again, not causation, but correlation, right? So that we see how they sort of work together, because not every time, Neptune has been retrograde in Pisces since June, and we haven't had an earthquake a day. We haven't had a solar storm every day. We've had quite a few, but not every day. So it's a correlation. And I kind of feel like sometimes it's the piling on of various types of transits coming together at one time that can create the biggest of the events on our planet. So, for example, today there is Mars in Sagittarius squaring, which is tension, the planet Saturn in Pisces. So now we have water being tensioned by fire, or we could say fire triggering water. And as we talk about this particular aspect, as I said on Friday, this is one for us to really watch what's going on in the news cycle right now, right around here. Yesterday, maybe even Saturday, Sunday, today, tomorrow, and the next day, maybe even for the whole week, watching what it is that's showing up in our news cycle from around the world, not just the USA or not just your own little neighborhood, but the bigger stories from around the world, because these are presaging things that will happen or could be a part of our experience when Mars and Saturn meet in a conjunction in April. So as we talked about, the cycles of these planets where they meet is a conjunction, then they come into the first 90-degree relationship, which we call the crisis of action. Like, what are we going to do? What's the action plan? Then we come into the opposition, which is sort of this culminating time. We see like the fullness perhaps of what's occurring, of the potential of that aspect. And then we see the closing square, which is what Mars and Saturn are doing today. And that closing square is often two-faced, right? It's the starting to close up the aspects conjunction, and it presages what the next conjunction will bring. So today is an important day, right? Watch the news. Watch the news over the weekend, right? And I'm guessing there are other things besides fires, or besides, the sun, which would be the fire element, and the solar sunspot activity, and the water activity of Saturn in Pisces. So there's likely other kinds of things that are going on that we could look at, perhaps because Mars rules conflict, Was there a conflict going on either in your own life or out in the outer world over the weekend? Because Mars is really representing action, the ignition point of something, the eruption of something, like a solar sunspot, an eruption. We call it an eruption, right? An acceleration of things that are going on. And Saturn is the pressure. Saturn is constriction. Saturn is that boundary, the limit through which we can build something that exposes the weaknesses in our foundations. And sometimes that boundary says, not yet, right? So while Mars can become very frustrated in the square to Saturn, Saturn can also get very frustrated with Mars wanting to take that action. So if these were people, if Mars was a person and Saturn was a person, these two would have a very conflicting daytime together right now, right? They would be in conflict. So when the two, Mars and Saturn, form a square, there is the potential for blocked impulses to break free, right? What is an earthquake? Essentially, it's where two tectonic plates meet and there's pressure building up between the two. One is either trying to dive beneath the other or move past the other or move over the top of the other. And there's pressure that locks them up, right? They get blocked. And then all of a sudden that pressure breaks and you have an earthquake, right? Same thing in a sunspot, right? You have this enormous amount of energy building up. And when it cannot contain itself anymore, it explodes, right? Blocked impulses exploding. That is a Mars square Saturn. Pressure without an outlet. What happens in, a pressure valve when it breaks? The pressure gives way. It's where force meets resistance, right? Where that something's going to give. And I don't know what it is, but something's going to give. And it's something trying to move maybe before conditions are quite ready. And in that case, it's often very shocking, right? Or it's very surprising what happens. This is literally Mars and Saturn square. That's what we're talking about. The square between Mars and Saturn is the frustrated warrior transit. This is Mars wanting to leap forward in Sagittarius, right? To explore the boundaries, beyond the boundaries, to move beyond and do it with enthusiasm and with speed and with righteous conviction, right? Got it. Saturn in Pisces says, though, slow down, feel, wait until you have all of yourselves, your spiritual, mental, emotional, physical, in alignment before you take that action. And if you put that combination together, you get internal tension. So each one of us feeling an internal tension. Sometimes we think that tension we're feeling is one thing, but it turns out to be another. Something that's going on within each one of us, though, that is wanting to break free. And it can lead us to emotional overwhelm. Water sign, Pisces, not only Saturn there, but Neptune, and creating perhaps, this emotional overwhelm feeling. Maybe explosive releases happening, both metaphorically, but also literally, right? As a sunspot, as a flood, as whatever, but also the emotional release of something. But sudden bursts of energy as well that come after a period of pressure building up, building up, building up. And sometimes earthquakes, both physical and personal. And this Mars square Saturn transit mimics what happens geologically, right? Fault lines under pressure and finally can't hold anymore, and boom, they explode or they move, they shake. Same thing within each one of us, something building up pressure and boom, it gives. All right. Then we have the elemental clash here, right? The element of fire clashing with water, Mars in Sag, fire, Saturn in Pisces, water. Fire wants direction. It wants to move. And Saturn in Pisces is water, and water wants dissolution. Water is holding memory. Water is seeking an outlet, right? It's contained, let's say, behind in the banks of a river or, around the banks of a lake. But if something gives way, such as a river behind a dam and the dam breaks way, then boom, you have water gushing, right? So water is diffuse. It can move into many different places, offer it up a crack or crevice, and it's in it, right? It's diving into it. Fire is decisive. And that means the square between the two can feel like trying to shoot a flaming arrow through a fog bank, through a difficult to see, difficult to pinpoint area. Um, it is about wanting clarity when nothing is clear. It really tests our ability to stay within our boundaries. It tests our ability to make decisions in the way that's correct for each one of us, right? If you go to your human design type and strategy and your authority, that tells you very distinctly how you are designed to make the best decisions for you and how you are designed to be in the best healthy relationships. It can cause us take action, but without knowing where the action lands. Where it's a shot in the dark, maybe spiritually feeling heavy, feeling maybe even emotionally heavy, when you want to feel motivated, when you need to feel motivated to get something done, but everything's heavy. So that means people this week, we may feel drained. We may feel blocked. You might feel triggered by something or somebody. You may be overreactive, like overblowing the energy. Now, again, this would be all based on how this is playing out in your own personal astrology. You got to know your chart, right? You need to know where Sagittarius is, where Mars is in your chart right now by transit, and where Saturn in Pisces and even Neptune in Pisces is right now in your chart, because these are where the collision of the two areas of your life are coming into contact, right? So let me show a chart here real quick, and I'll have to make this a little bit bigger. And darn it, I forgot to, I didn't highlight Mars because there's so much going on with Mercury. But here's Sagittarius right here, and here's our Mars on the left side, right? I always forget, you guys don't get to see my pointer. But Mars is over here in the first house of this chart. And that first house, if this were a person, is going to come into contact with the fourth house, if this were a person, because that's where Saturn is. So we have a square between the self, the I am presence, the body, the mask you're wearing that people see, and home and family and foundation, right? So there's a very, no wonder the earth is shaking, right? That fourth house Saturn is really about the ground beneath our feet. And how is it steady or is it not steady? And in the case of earthquakes, definitely not steady. That's the feeling we get, right? That we're shaking loose. So this isn't a day, this may not even be a week to force things to happen. In fact, I would make the argument that it's never a time to force things to happen, right? Force is not the right way, right? If you're having to force things, it's not quite the right timing, or the right people aren't aligned. The right opportunity isn't aligned yet. So then you're moving outside of your authority typically, or your type and strategy. So this is a day to slow down. This might be a week to slow down, breathe, and make course corrections, right? Maybe make some corrections to the direction you've been heading in that's been causing you stress or pressure to build up in your body. Now, the shadow expression, what do we want to watch out for? What's the potential negative expression for each one of us? And that could be impulsive reactions, accidents from rushing things, right? There are times that we can, with a Mars and Saturn transit, where we're moving too fast, where we skip a step that we shouldn't have skipped, right? And we fall down the stairs. Pushing past your intuition. If your gut instinct is saying one thing and you're saying, no, I need to go that way, and you do that, then a problem can come out. Burning out quickly, right? Because you might be burning that candle at both ends, and feeling spiritually foggy would not be unprecedented with this. And in the highest expression, or what's possible, would be strategic patience, right? Having a strategy and being patient as things unfold, redirecting your energy with intention. Also, turning frustration into focus rather than, letting that just spill over. Turn down the fire a bit. kind of maybe put the lid off a little bit so that it can release tension, creating boundaries that protect your vitality, and letting divine timing lead the way. And you can also strengthen your determination, your patience by slowing your pace, right? That's another big thing. The square is a course correction. It always is. And it's a cosmic hand kind of on our shoulders, saying you don't have to sprint. You don't have to. You don't have to run to get there. You have to aim first. Aim first. Be strategic in a way. Now, why would the Earth respond to these transits, right? Because it doesn't always respond with earthquakes. Otherwise, earthquakes would be totally predictable. We would just say, okay, Mars is square Saturn, so earthquakes happen on Earth. Neptune's changing direction. Watch out for earthquakes on Earth. But it doesn't always come out that way. But because Mars is an activator, Saturn compresses or constricts. Pisces dissolves the boundaries. It just erases the water staying within its boundaries. And Sagittarius, ruled by Jupiter, amplifies or magnifies things. And when fire and water clash, we have pressure releasing. And whether that happens here on Earth or in your body or in your emotions or in politics or whatever system we're taking a look at, any system under strain is going to have that pressure release moment. When Mars and Saturn pressurize each other, something gives way. Something needs to go. And that's how it is. So we get to move more slowly, deliberately, and intentionally. And that helps us. We get to not push things or force outcomes. We get to hydrate, keep hydrated. I have water and coffee. One dehydrates, one hydrates. Balance. That's the way I look at it. Recenter yourself before making any big decisions this week. Ask yourself, is it an aligned action or is it a restless action that I'm about to take? Right? Am I doing this just to relieve the tension of not doing something? Or is this truly an aligned action? And you'll know it's aligned because your intuition or your gut instinct, your emotional energy, or your sacral in your body is saying yes, 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 or no, no, no. And you'll know exactly, but you've got to tap into what that is for each of you. So use frustration as a signal, not a mistake, right? That frustration is there. By tonight, maybe that pressure begins to release some as the square wanes. But again, it becomes a signpost, a presaging of things to happen when we get into the spring, when we get into April, when Saturn and Mars meet again. But that time they meet in Aries, and Aries is Mars territory. And so that conjunction could be very explosive. So watch watch yourself personally, but also watch what's happening out and around you, because it may just be the stage being set for a bigger thing coming as we get into April in 2026. Okay, let's say good morning to people who are showing up. I haven't been able to do that yet. Good morning, Teddy and Amy D and Terry. Good to have you with us. And Sandra B, good morning to you. Joan, hello. I hope you're not flooding yet over there on the coast. Jackie, happy Monday. Listening from an Alexa device, but I'm here even without typing. That's awesome. And Asa, good to have you with us this morning. And good morning, Tamara. Sorry I'm late. Strangely, you didn't come up in my feed. Well, likely because yesterday I was like anywhere but working, right? I was not going to work yesterday. So consequently, the show that I typically will put up the night before, I didn't get around to doing. And so I had to do that first thing this morning. So it's possible the feed didn't pick it up right away. Teddy, we're in a rain shadow now. Way cool. It's not rain shadowing here where I am. It's pouring. And Teddy, where's the subscribe banner? Well, I tried several times this morning to get that subscribe banner to come up, and it just wouldn't. And I don't know if maybe that's because I wasn't live. Let's see if I can make it come up now. it just doesn't want to come up. And I don't know why. It did that one day. And ever since then, I haven't been able to get it to work. So I don't know. I'll have to contact StreamYard and find out what the heck. But let me just take a moment to say, everybody, please like, if you can hit the thumbs up on YouTube, or hit the heart button if you are on Facebook. And of course, also share. And on YouTube, you can subscribe. So hopefully you get notified without having to wait for me to show up in the feed. It should notify you. Bloop, Janet is on air. It is working? Oh, so you guys could see it. It came up. Oh, okay. I wonder why I don't see it. So let me put it back up again. There you go. Like and subscribe. Is it annoying to look at? You guys tell me that. And maybe I can take it back off. We see it as your watchers. Well, that makes sense, right? Because it's you that needs to see, like, and subscribe. All right. Thank you guys for telling me that. This is a good time to remind everybody about that. And now I'm going to take it off. Okay. I hope I took it off. Let's go back to comments. Yes, it is strange that I don't see it. It's strange because the first day I used it, I saw it, right? It showed up right in the lower corner. But maybe they take it off so it's not annoying to the person that's speaking. All right, let's go on to Mercury. This is where the Mindshake comes in this week. Literally everything from here on is about Mercury. And of course, there's a little dabble of Neptune thrown in there as well. If we zoom out now and we look at the bigger themes for the week, they seem to have a Mercury flair to them. This is one of those weeks where the cosmic weather kind of centers around the mind and the message and the messenger. And what are we finally ready to see, to say, and to understand or to change in our lives? So it's an interesting week. And it all began yesterday when Mercury came into a trine with Saturn. So at the same time, we have Mars squaring Saturn. We have Mercury trine Saturn. This is a flow of energy between the two. And yesterday in that beautiful trine, it was like a quiet click, perhaps in your mind, a lock opening up. Saturn kind of being able to ground Mercury's thoughts in, sharpening maybe our intuition, your instinct, but also giving us a moment of clarity before the pace accelerates as the week goes on. And the trine was kind of a stabilizer, could be considered a stabilizer, a moment where truth felt solid, or where clarity became the compass for the week ahead. The next stop, Mercury. In fact, I want to make sure I have this in the correct order because my mind was wobbling this morning. The correct order is next stop is Mercury in an opposition to Uranus, right? So Mercury opposing Uranus is a classic signature for the sudden news, something out that we didn't expect, breakthroughs, or the sudden revelation, the epiphany moment. It is intuitive downloads, the stuff that just drops in when you least expect it. Like my husband has been struggling to fix the dryer door because I broke the latch on it a week or so ago. And every time he puts the stupid thing back together, it doesn't want to work. It doesn't fix the way that it's supposed to fix, if you will. And so I'm hoping that an intuitive download drops in for you, Terry, so that you know exactly what to do and it can get fixed. Also expect the unexpected conversation with people. The things you didn't, think about that someone else might be interested in. This happened to me actually. Where was I? Because I've been so many places. Oh, this was on Saturday. We had our cookie baking day. And my grandson had a friend come over, and her mother, it was a girl that came over to visit. Her mother stayed and was chit-chatting with my daughter. And all of a sudden she starts talking about astrology. And I'm sitting on the stairs listening to this conversation going, oh my goodness. And it was an amazing aha moment, right? Expect the unexpected, a conversation, especially because, Jennifer said, oh, hey, my mom is an astrologer. And she looked over at me like, what? And we were able to have a great conversation about astrology in a most unexpected way. So those are the kinds of unexpected things that can happen when Mercury is lining up to oppose the planet Uranus. And there are changes in perspective as well, where we suddenly see the light in a new way. And this is the unexpected transit, but it's specifically working in the mind area, in our beliefs area. Uranus disrupts Mercury's normal pattern in the sky. And it's sort of this wake up, this needs to change, or wake up, this conversation needs to be had. It's brilliant energy for insight, but it's not always calm energy, right? Our minds can get very shook up by this particular energy. Now, before we go on to the next thing about Mercury this week, I wanted to talk about Mercury and Uranus because they both represent the mind. Mercury represents the lower mind, or what we would think of as the logical thinking, data collecting, information overload energy that comes in through our lower mind. While like the thinking process, right? Your memory, problem solving, pattern recognition, logic, all of those things are Mercury territory and in our minds. When we look at Uranus, Uranus rules the higher mind. So here's where we have revelation, where we have innovation or intuition, or intuitive breakthroughs, where we might have consciousness raising all in a moment, right? The consciousness raises. And those lightning strike downloads that we have that come from beyond logic, like we don't know where that came from. It's just that moment, right? So the opposition between the two levels of our mind, Mercury representing the lower level from, the sign of Scorpio, and Uranus representing the higher level coming from Taurus. It's a dramatic shift in perspective, perhaps, that is available for us. And it's not you figuring something out. It's really you receiving something from the wider universe or from the higher level of the mind. It's almost like they are, in a way, in a pattern that allows a flow from one level to the other. From the higher to the lower, perhaps, but even from the lower mind being able to use the information coming in from the higher mind. So it's a really great time for you to be open to that aha moment, right? It might just come flooding in, beknownst to you, it holds the key to maybe a solution to a problem you've been having, how to solve a relationship issue. It could be many different levels, right, that come in during this period of time. And then later in the week, Mercury re-enters Sagittarius. You'll remember back in early November, Mercury had already entered Sagittarius and then turned retrograde at 6 degrees of Sag, and then retrograded back into Scorpio, then turned direct later in November, and is now moving forward and will move into Sagittarius on Thursday, I believe it is. And this is where our thoughts take flight, right? We have Mercury moving back into Sagittarius, where the mind expands, where the story widens, where the broadening of our horizons takes place. And you start to see the bigger picture. Maybe, detail gives way to vision, where the dream becomes accessible, where curiosity gives way to truth telling. And Sagittarius energy turns the mind outward toward those broader ideas, right? To see the bigger picture, to philosophical conversations, right? Talking about the deeper, the more belief-oriented things, looking for meaning. What does this mean? All caps, mean, MEAN, for me in my life. Seeking direction, right? This is realigning and realignment for each one of us, but also a realignment toward your authenticity, being real, being you. And this is where you get your new North Star, perhaps. It doesn't overwrite your North Star, by the way, through your North Node of your chart, but this might realign you in a new direction. And what that means is that things that maybe have been simmering just below the surface break through, right? The bubbles pop out. So be ready for that this week, right? That's distinctly possible, that aha moment. And then as we get to the end of the week, I believe it's actually Saturday, Mercury will sextile Pluto. And now we have depth and power and revelation, which reminds me, I'm going to add the picture back to the stage here so that you can see I drew these green lines to show these Mercury connections. The first green line connects Mercury to Pluto, the one that I'm just now getting ready to talk about. This is a sextile, and a sextile is a harmonizing aspect between planets. And so when we have depth, power, and revelation potential, it has a harmonizing effect. If you look at the one just to the right, that is the Mercury trine Saturn and Mercury trine Neptune. They're both right there. And then Mercury opposing Uranus is the one that you can see going straight across the horizontal of the chart. So when you have, these are the, an opposition is probably the trickiest of the relationships that Mercury will trigger this week, only because there's a tendency in an opposition for things to be pulling in two different directions. Like one, Uranus pulling you to grounding in your higher mind, while Mercury in Scorpio saying, but let's investigate more, let's look deeper. So those have to be solved, right? That's a solution that you'll have to work with. But in reality, these are mostly positive energies, but they do have a tendency to come together and shake up your mind, shake up your thinking process, shake up your beliefs and those things that you take for granted, right? So by the end of the week, Mercury takes everything that's been gathered, all of the different thinking processes, ideas, and so forth, your perspective, your perceptions, and brings them together and gains clarity maybe from the trine with Saturn, breakthroughs from Uranus, and the new perspective coming from Sagittarius, but also Pluto's transformative energies breaking through. So, and then there's also the trine to Neptune there, right? Neptune, bringing us new spiritual insights, perhaps new divine messages dropping in as the week goes on. So this is a powerful, investigative, penetrating energy that Mercury, in the relationship to Pluto brings together for us on Saturday. And it reveals maybe what's been hidden. It helps us to name the deeper truth. And it helps us to commit to profound internal change, right? All that pressure is there for a reason. There's something that you have to see that within yourself that you need to do differently, or that you need to think differently about. So the mind is illuminated and empowered this week to think maybe differently, or to think in an elevated way, to get outside of the old you, right? The old energy of you. Now, not you necessarily, but your mind. There's nothing wrong with you, by the way. And there's nothing really wrong with your mind, except when it holds you back or holds you down or tells, a narrative that's old. So now it's time to shake that up. Now, in the background of all of this week, with Mercury going into changing signs and aspecting other planets, Neptune goes direct. And what that means is that since June 30th, when Neptune turned retrograde, there's been an inner focus of all of that Neptunian energy. As all of this mental activity unfolds this week with Mercury, then the planet of intuition and illusion and spiritual perception starts to station direct in Pisces and brings some of that more hidden energy up to the surface for us to, show out into the world or release into the world. So when Neptune turns, our emotional and our psychic fields feel it, and the earth feels it too. In the beginning of the show this morning, remember I said that Neptune is the planet or the god that represented earthquakes and floods and tidal waves and weather, literally Neptune and weather. So this shift in Neptune's direction opens up or reopens up intuitive channels, perhaps within each one of us. It also dissolves the fog that we've been under since June. Maybe we see things more clearly. Not yet, but as Neptune changes that direction and starts to build up speed, not technically changing direction, but from our perspective on Earth, looks like he's changing direction. It also shifts how it is that we see things from our mind's third eye, right? From the intuition side. Now, combined with all of Mercury's hyperactivity this week, we can feel like sudden spiritual clarity, that aha moment, the profound one, right? Not just the little moment that shakes you awake. You might have that psychic sensitivity, dreams, right? In your dreams that you see in your mind's eye something, maybe more symbolic dreams, right? Where you might have to decode them a little bit, right? Sometimes our dreams are all symbolic, and it makes it very hard to know what is that symbol meaning. Well, this is where you personally can really understand your insights better because you know yourself. Right? I know when I dream of tidal waves or lots of water that there's an emotional upheaval coming in my life. And if I dream of animals, those are usually the shamanic symbols of something that needs to change in my life. So for each one of you, what are those symbols when you dream? What do they mean? It could be emotional release as well, right? Something that's pent up that needs to be let go of. And expect maybe that it's the increased earthquake activity is not surprising to me at all. And Neptune rules the tectonic processes of earthquakes. So it's an awakening week on many levels. I do not know that the earthquakes are done. I do not know that if volcanoes are going to join in. I do know that I'm sitting here in Washington State undergoing an atmospheric river that seems to be intensifying. And so the threat and risk of floods is higher and higher. And the river, not that far away, doesn't usually flood here, but floods downstream and upstream. And we've got to watch that this week because Neptune kind of exaggerating the effects, the impacts of all of that water. So it's an awakening week for us on many levels, through the Mercury transits, through Mars squaring Saturn, through Neptune turning direct. Your mind is being realigned. First, it's being grounded. Saturn helping to ground, then awakened, then expanded, and then transformed. Right? What's not to like about a week where your mind is out of your mind, right? Everything Mercury touches this week supports a shift in how you think and how you perceive and how you speak and how you understand the next steps in your life, right? That next step. All right. So as we turn our attention to the seismic activity, the tidal shifts, and the unusual weather patterns, and the energetic hypersensitivity in people and animals, we can trace this back to Neptunian changes. And then, the weekend's solar flares sort of added this layer of electromagnetic mess to it all, right? The stress from the electromagnetic, being, partly, animals and humans, we all have metal in our bodies, right? Our blood is iron based. You're metal. And metal is electromagnetic. And our thinking processes, our brains, I'm sure there are metals in our brains. And animals, for example, their migration patterns come from a little magnetic organ in their brains that helps them navigate directionally. So, this is not surprising then when big things happen in the world, when the planets are doing this dance. And it's not the cause. Again, we're not saying that Neptune caused earthquakes or that the Mars square Saturn caused, solar flares. But we are saying that when the cosmic dam is churning, right, with planets moving every which way, the earth waters often do too. And the earth crust often does too. They work together. Now, for the past several months, if we look back now at Neptune retrograde, what is it that we've been experiencing, right? It's been dissolving illusions, stripping away fantasies, peeling back the layers of confusion, that we've been carrying since the early spring when Neptune first moved into Aries, and all of this change started building up in our world. And then retrograde Neptune turns our vision inward, just as we were kind of, able to think about what the changes in the outer world meant. Neptune turned retrograde and brought it inward. So then we were stuck, thinking. We were stuck, with the results of that Neptunian energy. And maybe began a process of inner healing, maybe discovering an inner truth, maybe dissolving boundaries that had become too encrusted or too rigid, spiritual introspection, looking deeper inward, each one of us, detoxing. Neptune, rules poisons, and Neptune rules the things that we get toxic from. And maybe we were detoxing from old dreams and old habits. So it's like the universe dimmed the lights for several months so we could hear our souls more clearly, right? Making things a little more clear for us from the internal perspective. Now that Neptune's turning direct, we have this fog beginning to lift. And by the way, this occurs on Thursday, I believe. So later in the week, but we're already feeling the impacts of this. The emotional haze starts to clear away. Intuition becomes sharper, not in a dreamy way like it was during the retrograde, but in a more directed and more heart-centered way. So this is where you begin to rebuild your spiritual vision. So important. This is where you can reconnect with your higher guidance and see the truth of situations that are in the world, but also within your own life, with more compassion, with more empathy, with more forgiveness, tolerance, and acceptance, and universal love, all words that we also associate with Neptune. Maybe understanding more about what your soul is longing for next. What's the next step for each one of us? And it's the shift from the inner dissolution that was happening with Neptune retrograde to the outer spiritual expression. What did you learn about yourself and about your inner dynamic, about spirit, that you now want to take into the outer world as a practice? Now, the Neptune effect on a Mercury-driven week is sort of interesting, I think, right? Where we have Neptune's tendency to fog things up and Mercury wanting to get clarity. It kind of creates, maybe confrontation between the two energies. And this is where things can get really interesting for the week ahead, where Mercury is incredibly active this week, making breakthroughs and creating the shifts in our perspectives and in our what we perceive, cracking open our awareness in some ways. Neptune turning direct adds a psychic layer to all of that and an emotional layer to all of it. So it means your insights aren't just mental for the week. They might be intuitive, they might be spiritual. They're soul level aha moments that are coming this week for all of us in various shapes and sizes, right? In various ways. And again, a lot of this has to do with where is Pisces in your natal chart. Most of this is happening in Pisces and focused from Scorpio to Pisces, but also Sagittarius to Pisces. And what does that mean for you? So looking at your own chart, knowing those houses and what they mean. If you need help, you know where to find me, right? Find me, I get help. The highest expression of Neptune turning direct, I think, is a whole litany of things that feel good to us, like a renewed sense of faith in things are moving exactly how they're meant to, even though they may seem really distracting or disruptive at the moment. Compassion for yourself and for others. Maybe receiving clarity about what your dreams or your vision are about, what is next for you, and deep intuitive awareness of what is happening around you. Spiritual rebuilding, perhaps. Neptune, sitting there very close to Saturn. That's what the two of them have really been working on with us. How do we build a spiritual foundation for our physical world? And listening to what it is that life is calling you toward. Don't forget, Neptune is in gate 25, the gate of spirit. So Neptune is really calling us forth to be the divine in the human, to really break down that barrier that we have to living a spiritual life in our physical world. And when I say spiritual, I'm not talking about religion and all of that. I'm talking about understanding something is bigger within you, right? You're not just this, physical body, but also being, aware of and empathetic to the plight of others in the world, especially when we have a lot of people that are suffering right now in various ways, from whether they're financial or immigration status or, war torn energies, things like that. There's a lot going on with others that, we can feel empathy for. In the shadow expression, here's where we get into the overwhelm of it all. We feel it too deeply. It is like we wear our emotions on our sleeves and it ends up, kind of going out from us. Instead of holding empathy, we get into more of a sympathy energy where we feel like we must do something about it. That in and of itself is not necessarily a bad thing, but it can mean that we start to do things that we weren't meant to be doing. We may become very idealized in our look out at the world and what it is that we can do to help. Maybe we idealize situations that still need boundaries, right? And we're wanting to dissolve the boundary. Maybe escapism and avoidance is another shadow experience that we should talk about, because sometimes we don't want to see, we don't want to deal with what needs to be dealt with. So we do the escapism thing. Maybe it's emotional flooding. I would say there's something about that. Sensitivity as well heightens during a week like this, where we might be more sensitive to collective grief and to the chaos that is happening around the world. But paired with Saturn in Pisces right now, Neptune's shift is actually more stabilizing than dissolving. And that's helpful, right? It helps us to stay within our boundaries somewhat. So today's a beautiful day. This week is a beautiful week to meditate, to journal, to pay attention to your dreams, to really listen to the synchronicities that are going on, such as I noticed, J-Lo noticed, big sunspots create earthquakes on Earth. Don't correlate with earthquakes on Earth. That's a synchronicity, that a large sunspot, breaking away, being depressurized, as it were, rippling into 3 minutes later, a 6.7 earthquake hitting Alaska. I don't know. It's too close to call. Pay attention then to those synchronicities that you notice. Rest more than usual. You might feel like you need more sleep. Allow emotional release so that you're not holding on to a whole bunch of frustration. Soften your expectations of yourself and of others. Trust the intuitive nudges that you get to, move. And then what becomes clear today or clearer this week is something that's likely been brewing since June, right? Because Neptune turned retrograde then. All right. Now, there was something else that I really wanted to share that I thought was so fascinating this morning. And I know I put it in my notes here. Okay, here's what it was. So we've been talking a lot this morning about the Mindshake, right? The week with Mercury and the mind. And as I'm sitting here this morning, putting all this show together, what comes across my telephone is a news story. And it was a news story by Marianne Williamson. And it was a post in that she was putting in, and it said, "Time for a great rethink." Time for a great rethink. I can't make this up, right? It's like the cosmos is literally broadcasting the same message to everybody, right? That Mercury is delivering to each one of us individually. So time for a great rethink. And this is the week where the lower mind and the higher mind come together. They collide, right? Within us. This is the week where the stories we've been telling ourselves get disrupted, especially if they're stories of what you can't do or who you can't be. They get disrupted in favor of, yes, I can do and be anything I want to do and be. This is the week where clarity cracks through the old assumptions. And this is the week where something inside you shifts, where it has to shift. right? The weight of all of the transits is, piling on. It has to shift within you. And Marianne Williamson posting something called Time for the Great Rethink. Can't make that up. I just can't make it up. And of course, this is a week where it's not really about the chaos of all of the things that are going on. It's an evolution. It's a reawakening. It's the mind being retuned. And Mercury trine Saturn grounds us, right? Mercury opposing Uranus jolts you awake if you've been asleep. Mercury into Sagittarius widens your perspectives. And Mercury sextile Pluto deepens your truth. Neptune trining Saturn, or Neptune trining Mercury is also lifting the fog. And Neptune turning direct lifts that fog so that we can finally see what our soul has been trying to tell us for a very long time. So it really is the great Mindshake or great rethink moment this week. And I'm thinking it's just the start of this, right? It is like the watershed moment where we no longer can stay in the old think. We have to move into the new think. All right. Now, also this week, we have a new human design week starting tomorrow, running from the 9th through the 13th. And this is a week where the sun moves into the gate 26. I can actually share my screen. I do believe, body graph chart. There we go. Okay, so hopefully you guys can see this. So down here is the gate 26. This is where the sun is. It is on the will center or the heart center. It's traditionally associated with salesman kinds of energy, but in its highest expression, the gate 26 is not about selling anything. It's about truthful influence. It's about honoring your commitments. It's about living in alignment with your values, also known as, AKA, integrity, right? So this gate 26 with the sun sitting here teaches us that what you say must match what you do, walking your talk, where your word is your currency. And influence works best when it comes from authenticity. If you're trying to sell something to someone, because it is a sales channel that it's a part of in, the human design circuitry, then it works best if you're telling the truth. And if you're not just trying to sell something to somebody, but you're trying to show that person the benefits of how this particular thing would be for them, but coming from a place of truth. And integrity amplifies impact at this point in time. So this week asks you to check in with yourself as far as that goes. Where am I over-promising? Where am I under-promising? Because it can work either way. Where am I negotiating against my own integrity? Right? Where am I doing things in the wrong way for me? But also gate 26 is the recalibration of the ego energy, aligning desire and willpower and truth. Okay, so that's the sun at gate 26. The earth will be in the gate 45, a gate up here on the throat. In quantum human design, known as the gate of, not in quantum, but in traditional human design, known as the gate of the king or the queen. And in quantum human design, called the gate of distribution. Gate 45 is the place where resources get distributed, but not in egoic sense, or at least it's not meant to be in the egoic sense, but as the steward, the good steward of resources for the tribe. It sits on the throat center. So this is where our words become direction. And the earth energy grounds us here into how we share, to how we allocate, how we speak for the group, or how we manage our own resources. And resources aren't just money, right? Money, energy, time, but also how we use leadership energy to uplift others, using leadership energy in the correct way. The gate 45 will ask us to distribute our energy, our attention, our wisdom, our resources in a conscious way, right? In a good steward kind of way. And are we doing it consciously or by default, right? So when the sun-earth dynamic here works as a pair, we always get a teaching lesson, by the way, by the sun and earth together in about balance. And this this week's story is about aligning your influence with your responsibility to the collective. So it's not about convincing people of anything. It's about serving through integrity. And you lead best when your words, your actions, and your values match. So when you share what you have in a way that empowers the people around you, it has to be congruent, right? That's the energy of this week. If we look at the gene keys, we see the shadow of the gate 26 is pride. We see the gift is artfulness, and the siddhi, invisibility. I always loved this particular gate in the gene keys because it just felt so fun to think of ourselves as being artful in our gift, in the way that we share of ourselves with others. Pride tries to manipulate, and artfulness influences through authenticity. And then invisibility is the ego disappearing into purpose. Then if we look at the gate that the earth sits in, the gene key 45, this is energy in the shadow that's called dominance. And in the gift, we have synergy. And in the siddhi, the highest expression, we have communion, the coming together. Dominance tries to control the resources. Synergy shares the resources. And communion brings the tribe into unity around resources. So it's an interesting week all the way around. And here I thought this morning I wouldn't have enough to talk about, but here we go. We have reached the end. And hopefully all of you have a wonderful week ahead. I will see you on Friday. We'll talk about what's happening maybe over the weekend, or I'll think of something else interesting to talk about. Let's see, are there any other questions? Natasha, good morning to you. You're talking about the elementals, as I just did a video about it. In my fireplace, I cleaned the glass and it looks like a forest fire now today. Rain and wind, then earthquakes. Wow, it's all here, right here. TD Hawk, Tamara, felt strongly led yesterday while I was out and about, and some amazing connections and shares happen, and happenstance meetings occurred and conversations, only because I was where and when I was led to be, right? Patty, good morning to you. Asa, if you haven't yet, hit the like button. Thank you so much for that reminder. And that is it for me today, guys. Thank you so much for being here. I'll see you on Friday. Bye for now.